For everyone with an interest in MASH or, more broadly, steatotic liver disease, Surf's up. Surfing the MASH Tsunami's annual year-end interviews with some of the people who made a difference in the MASLD world in 2023, Season 4, Episode 50 plus, starts now.
Today on Surfing the MASH Tsunami.
There are three things that I think are interconnected to one another. First and foremost, I'm waiting for March 14th, 2024 to determine what the go, no-go decision from the FDA will be. My second point in the fact that the past year, I have seen an influx of physicians outside of GI and hepatology that have been very present at some of the meetings.
I think where Rachel comes in on the first 2 points, we're moving forward and we have opportunities, but we do need to broaden it from purely liver-related outcomes, because the liver-related to a lot of other outcomes, specifically on the point of people engaging, it takes two to tango.
Yeah, it's been a breakout year, to say the least. We are closing on our funding round. We have tripled the size of the team. We are in the middle of a multiple sites preclinical trial, and this will be our pivotal study to further validate our core technology.
You've seen a lot of things. It's not only investor pitches, but actually going to events. And I'm wondering what you've observed that the people who listen to this podcast might not have observed.
The early stage investors that we pursue are in the life science space, are potential strategic partners, understand the hurdles, the time horizon to get to where we are today through various milestones, both preclinical and commercialization milestones. And what I have seen firsthand is that the early stage investors in life science space are actively searching for MASH and liver fibrosis tools.
As a momentous year in steatotic liver disease comes to an end, the Surfing the MASH Tsunami team is reviewing the year with some of our favorite guests. Today, liver health advocate Louise Campbell and pricing and forecasting guru Roger Green interview hepatology researcher, entrepreneur, and AGED Diagnostics founder and CEO Rachel Zayas on an eventful 2023 and her vision for what is ahead in 2024 on the Surfing the MASH Tsunami podcast.
And this morning, Louise and I are here with our good friend Rachel Zayas. Rachel, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. It's a beautiful day in December in Washington, D.C.
As it is in Philadelphia. And Louise tells me the rain is stopping. Are you in London or are you in Taunton now?
No, I'm in Somerset and the rain has been overnight. We've had several millimetres, but not quite inches yet, I don't think. But it looks like it's brightening up. There's your weekly weather forecast from Somerset.
Heck, we probably had a tenth of a meter in the last 24 hours around here. We've got local flooding. We don't have crocodiles on the street like they do in Queensland, Louise, but we got stuff going on. And Rachel, I haven't been able to catch up with you. It's like every time I try to find you, you're somewhere else, and you're not only somewhere else, but you're flying to somewhere else. So it's been busy, huh?
It's been very busy. This year, I think I've taken 12 plus trips to Palo Alto. I think I've been to close to 15 other states. I've been to Europe 3 times this year, and we still got a couple weeks left before the end of the year. So a lot of investor conferences, a subset of NASH and hepatology conferences, but a lot of in-person meetings and a lot of growth. This has really been a breakout year for us and our team so far.
So bravo. And Louise is quietly, she's applauding with her microphone off. Bravo. Or brava, take your pick. Is there a particular airline that you now get massive privileges from, or have you been unable to negotiate that?
Yeah, there's 2, but usually when I go to California, I'm on the direct flight on Alaska, and I've been on it so many times this year that I actually know most of the flight attendants. so that's nice. They always bring me extra coffee, which is very much welcomed.
And for those of you who don't get to see the video of this, which will be in virtually all of you, you can't see exactly how prominently Rachel has product positioned her Starbucks cup at the bottom of the screen so that we can see it constantly. All right, to be completely tangential, what I drink my coffee out of is a Starbucks carafe that I got at the original Pike Place store about 8 years ago when we were out there for our 15th anniversary. So, and Louise, I'm assuming you're not drinking Starbucks this morning because you've got better taste than that.
We're in the afternoon. I'm on Pepsi Max. Sugar-free soda, of course.
Okay. And Rachel immediately switched to water so that we know that she's being healthy at the same time. Okay, enough on all that. Just to start, just basic groundbreaker, one good thing personally that's happened for each of us in the past year.
I've spoken about this in the past, but I'll speak about it again. When I was in college, I started writing a book and I put it down for many years because work happened and life happened. I picked it up a few years ago to have a creative outlet. And this year has really been a breakout year with finishing it and getting to the end. Probably have a few months left to complete it. And well, it's definitely an accomplishment personally for me to finish it. It's really been more about the journey and the creative process and having that daily, weekly outlet to look forward to that is so otherworldly from the day-to-day operations and day-to-day life. It's really like jumping into another universe of creativity. And it's been very rewarding through the process. So the journey itself has been the biggest accomplishment for me personally.
Well, first of all, that's fantastic. The last couple of times I'd asked you about the book, you had said, well, I haven't gotten back to it yet. So I'm delighted to hear this because when we started talking about it 2 years ago when we first met, it was such a cool thing that you seem to be doing that when you said you'd gotten away from it, I didn't say anything. But I'm delighted to hear that you're back to it. That's great. So what have you learned in that journey that makes you better at being a CEO?
Yeah, I think that it's really important to intentionally incorporate diversity in your learning process. So nothing in life is unidirectional. It's not you should go to a lecture and absorb information, but rather you should go to a lecture, absorb information, you should read, you should listen to wonderful podcasts, you should interact and interview others. So it's really finding what these different aspects of entrepreneurship and creativity are and how to pursue them, absorb them, and then incorporate that into the company and the team. So I'm a big believer in being intentional in growth and learning. In relation to that, creativity is very important in entrepreneurship. So I try to have structured conversations with my team members about that often. So that's one thing I've learned is what opens your creative flow and what other aspects are you open to attempting or trying to determine what works well for you and what doesn't.
So I'm looking at Louise and thinking this is the fifth interview we've done, or the fourth or fifth in the series, and everyone else has talked about time with their kids or vacations. So I'm trying to figure out how Louise or I comes up with something that is even remotely on the same plane as what you talked about in terms of a good personal for the year. Louise, you got one?
Oh, I've got one.
I like to throw curveballs.
Of course you do. That's usually my role on this. Well, we've got my parents and Mark's mother, and we're all going to the Isle of Wight for Christmas. Well, because we pay for the privilege now of somebody else hosting us for Christmas and providing all of the entertainment, all of the food and everything else. Because last year we all went away and I ended up doing all of the organisation for the 3 days of Christmas. And it was like, oh my God, that's just too much hard work with wheelchairs and trolley dollies and God knows what. So I will not be sitting on a Caribbean beach, but I will be on a little island south of the UK having traipsed our parents. So I'm actually looking forward to all of this, I have to say, because it was very good fun.
You mentioned yesterday the Winter Wonderland there. Did I get that right?
Winter Wonderland's in London, and I was there last week with my husband on our wedding anniversary.
Okay, so you've done that. You've done that already. Okay, yeah. So now all we're doing next week is going and hanging out with my it's the wonders of Facebook, right? My wife, when she was in sleepaway camp 50 years ago, made one very, very close friend. But my wife lived in New Jersey. The friend lived on Long Island. The friend went to college in the Midwest. They completely lost touch. It's about 8 or 10 years ago, and she's in Minneapolis for a final presentation and posts on Facebook. She's there and has no plans for dinner. And out of the blue, Tina calls and says, hey, if you're free for dinner tonight, my husband and I would love to take you out. And the four of us, I've connected, and we've become really good friends, and they wound up moving to Connecticut to be near their kids. So we're just going to hang out with them for 3 days next week, and they're probably the easiest people I ever get to spend time with. So looking forward to it tremendously. Probably a lot of dominoes, if I don't miss my guess, or backgammon, or both. But all in good fun and just great people. All right, now let's dive into 2023. All right, so Rachel, as a member of the MASLD community in 2023, how would you describe or depict the year for MASLD community as a whole? And then we'll kind of come back to you and your corner of it in a moment.
Yes. From a high level, there are three things that I think are interconnected to one another. First and foremost, I'm waiting for March 14th, 2024 to determine what the go, no-go decision from the FDA will be for resmetirom. I think that this will not only be a game changer for directly in the hepatology space, but the greater community as well, which brings me to my second point in the fact that the past year, I have seen an influx of physicians outside of GI and hepatology that have been engaging in talks, discussions, and been very present at some of the meetings over the last 12 months. So it really does seem to be that there is a slow but sure shift in the silos between primary, secondary, and tertiary care, because it's not going to just be GI and hepatology that are going to, that do and are going to address these patients from a really large and societal impact. So that's one thing that I've seen. And I think those two things are synergistic in itself, because you have other physicians, cardiology, endocrinology, some primary care physicians, but not many yet, that are really asking the questions of how do we identify these patients, what is risk stratification, and then what are the potential treatment options now that there's a therapy on the table. Those are the two big things. I can pause there. There's a third I wanted to discuss, but I'll pause for a moment.
So the most interesting thing about those two items to me is that when you talk to people who are in the guts of the medicine of it and the medical societies of it, I'm not sure they're feeling the same energy from other professions that you just described. In fact, there are concerns that we're not getting enough energy or we're not getting it right. So I'd love to know what neighborhoods you're hanging out in that give you that feel so that we can be a little more affirmative to our audience. Go ahead.
So not to say that it's there and it's present and like masses of groups of people from these different specialties are coming to the talks, lectures, and conferences, but rather there's a small subset of people that are there. So if you interact and you network with those that are sitting in the audience, there's been more this year than there has in past years. So they're not coming in the 10s or the 20s, but there's been a few. So I think that it's a small but cautiously optimistic shift that I'm seeing. So it's not large, but it's one thing that I have noted by going to various conferences. So, for example, Digestive Disease Week and AASLD, there did seem to be more cardiologists, endocrinologists that were there in the audience asking questions, going to the mic and engaging in a way that I haven't seen in the past. So that's one thing I've noted.
So if what you're saying is the leading edge is starting to show up, that's a big thing. So any storm clouds from 2023 that are worth mentioning?
Nothing that comes to top of mind. Is there anything you can think of that you want to discuss?
Well, no, actually, people have been talking about OCA at the FDA. And I might be a minority here. I'm not sure in the scheme of things that was a storm cloud. You know, as we learned, the data just weren't there to support the approval, and therefore it didn't get approved. And that wasn't. In 2020, people were really upset at the FDA. On this round, I've not heard a lot of that. I've heard more of people saying, well, gee, maybe the drug just wasn't going to get there. And now, part of that, by the way, might be because in 2020, nothing was for years away, and now resmetirom's on the horizon. It looks a lot better. But I kind of feel the way you did. I didn't see any real storm clouds in 2023.
Follow-up question about that. Well, the science and the data wasn't there to support going forward with OCA. Do you think that this could have a negative impact on the greater investor community in the MASLD space?
Well, you talk to more investors than I do, but my snap reaction is Madrigal raised $500 million in the last year. CymaBay raised $224 million once they had shown positive phase 3 results in PBC, and GenFit is highly valued based on elafibranor and NIS2. So I think the answer is that the investor community sees the momentum and therefore will get excited about things once adequately proven. And early stage, less money and more people might be willing. I don't know about those risks. I'm not talking to a lot of people with drugs in phase 1, but from what's visible, it looks to me like, in fact, that has not had a negative effect on the community because other people have published highly successful phase 3s, et cetera. Louise, I don't know kind of what you see from where you sit, either geographically or in the treatment chain.
I think on changing investors, I probably agree with you, and I'm not in the main healthcare space, but I think we now have better tracking mechanisms, the AI, the genomics, we've got better non-invasive techniques, and we are moving the FDA a little bit on the movement away from biopsy or to have different outcomes measures. And I think if we're looking for going forward with medication, the more that we utilize the toys that we now have that can give us outcomes non-invasively, I would be more likely to invest because we can get the outcomes quicker, more patient focused. And I think that for me is a win-win, even though we will need biopsy going forward for a number of years and until such time as we discussed it with Dean Ty, that we get robust data in the next years to really drill down into this. So if I was an investor, I would certainly think, well, I've got better ways to pull out my money earlier if there isn't an effect. That would be the way I would look at it. Not that I'm going to be investing, but it would be getting more and more non-invasive technologies out into clinical trials, being able to use things like FibroScan in all your cardiometabolic studies, not just a liver trial. And I think when Rachel was talking about the first 2 points, when we look at liver-related mortality, I think it was Chris Estes when he came on, said that liver-related mortality across the board is only 2%. We need to be looking at other forms of mortality at the liver health effects, which is why I think we need to have the same way as you would go for an X-ray, the same way as you would put in an ECG into all of your clinical trials. There's very few clinical trials I ever worked on that didn't require those basics. So you can put a basic non-invasive marker for a liver because we don't know that they're not cirrhotic just because they're absent in tests. So I think where Rachel comes in on the first 2 points, I think we're moving forward and we have opportunities, but we do need to broaden it from purely liver-related outcomes because the liver-related to a lot of other outcomes. Specifically on the point of people engaging, I think there was that bit of excitement that Rachel feels about people engaging with the hepatology community. And Jean certainly went to obesity conferences. It takes two to tango. If we as the liver community are not fronting at these major conferences with our big guns, we are not going to get anywhere. We cannot expect everybody to come to us to change the hepatology landscape or cardiometabolic landscape. But if we are not at those primary care conferences, a primary care physician does not think liver disease is important. If we are not at a cardio conference with our big guns, they don't think it's important. So we really have to go and party in their meetings because then we can get them back to us. That's how we're going to change it. But we are in the small clique of the community, the MASLD community, who all talk together, work together, communicate together, meet each other at conferences. And we just need to spread that, bring more in. So Strictly Come Dancing with the stars. We need to tango with diabetes.
Well, look, frankly, Jorn, if Jorn were on this particular call, he might be able to talk about representing hepatology at DDW Japan, which is something that had never...
And he's a big gun.
Yeah, he is a big gun.
Yeah, he's a big gun. Send him. Yeah. Foxtrot with the fib 4.
I like it. So with that, and in that context, why don't we shift to your 2023, Rachel? Kind of what's your year been?
Yeah, it's been a breakout year to say the least. We are closing on our funding round. We have tripled the size of the team. So we are now a team of 5, almost 6 full time. We are in the middle of a multiple site preclinical trial. So we have 3 sites in the United States, 1 in Germany, and growing. And this will be our pivotal study to further validate our core technology. We've done several studies directly in the liver as well as in peripheral blood, and now we're expanding what we've found in peripheral blood. What was imperative about that smaller pilot study is that the goals of it were multifaceted in the sense that we identified a set of biomarkers that could differentiate steatotic liver disease from MASH, and then a second set of biomarkers that could stage liver fibrosis on a 4-stage sliding scale. We were were able to do that successfully and then link it to biological relevance to ensure that these were coming directly from the liver and represented biomarkers that we found in our liver tissue studies. So that data really seeded a strong foundation for fundraising this year, identifying additional collaborators, and then really expanding our research and development arm. So we have four sites, 3 in the United States, one in Germany, and we are recruiting patient samples that are well-characterized patient samples. All are based off of biopsy and then also have sequential testing to shrink and be very intentional with the indeterminate zone to ensure that what we're looking at really has multiple aspects to confirm this patient has a NAS score of 6 with like MRI PDFF and FIB4 to really shrink that indeterminate zone. So research and development is off to the races. We expect to have an interim readout by March of next year and then be completed with this trial by the end of the year. And
is next year 24 or 25?
Next year is 24. So
I've heard people already talking about 24 as this year, so I just needed to check. Thanks.
Next year is 24. So we'll have an interim readout at some point in March, and then we'll have a final analysis for this study by end of the year. So that's us in a nutshell. It's been really helpful to go out and pitch and present at a lot of the MedTech investor conferences. That has really seeded a strong foundation for growth and development. And I'll pause there.
First of all, for those who don't recall, I think it was part of episode 45 of this year where Rachel talked about exactly what that experience of going out and pitching was like and what she'd learned in the process. So we don't have to recap this in terms of what did you learn in 2023. We got that one on tape already. Louise, go ahead.
I think it's very exciting. It's hard work going out and saying, invest. We need to do this. We need to grow. So hats off. And I don't envy that task. But it sounds like very exciting work. I'm waiting for you to come to Australia to get the 4th hub in that spoke round for Germany. So new base.
We'll be there sooner rather than later, hopefully.
So Rachel, what have you learned about the disease or diagnostics or in the past year through the work you've been doing that you're comfortable sharing with us?
Yeah, I think considering the population is really top of mind. So let's provide a very specific example. So in a scientific question that we have asked internally is the biomarkers found in a 17-year-old female, and let's just say for argument's sake, a Hispanic female, is it the same set of biomarkers at the same cutoff or concentration as a 72-year-old male with European ancestry? So that's something we are interrogating now to ensure that the efficacy of our biomarkers has the same utility in diverse patient populations. And those are, of course, are 2 examples. And you can cut the pie in 10 or 100 different ways. So you want to be logical in recruiting diverse patient populations, but you also want to ensure that you have a statistically significant amount of patient samples in each of those distinct groups. So we don't have a readout from that so far, but it's a question that we are asking and testing out now to ensure that efficacy is similar. Because what you do find in several studies is the overall performance of biomarkers preclinical is often a lot better than once you get into the clinic. And our hypothesis for that, not just in NASH, but in other disease states as well, is that the sample size is biased in one direction or another. So we're trying to be as intentional as possible in clinical trial design and patient recruitment to ensure that we are meeting a statistically significant amount of patients to ensure that efficacy is similar in these discrete groups.
So at the risk of revealing that I just totally missed the point, when you say that sample sizes are skewed, is it the sample size or the sample that's skewed?
It's the patient demographic. So if you look at a lot of studies, they are, like, for example, in MASH, they are in older patients between the ages of 40 to 70, and you don't include pediatric populations. There's a lack of diversity in both race, ethnicity, as well as underlying causes. And you really do need to recruit distinct patients. So it's based off of the demographics, not the sample size. if that makes sense.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking when I was listening, is that you can get a large sample of all the wrong people and you haven't solved anything, right? Okay, my soapbox for a second, statistical fallacy. People think bigger samples are better, and they're not. Random samples are better. Better to have a random sample of 100 than a skewed sample of 1,000,000. And so I just wanted to make sure that was what you were getting at, is that it's hard to get the right distribution at a sufficient sample size, which is what I think I heard you say.
Correct.
How does one solve that problem?
So recruiting from distinct institutions and ensuring you include a pediatric population to ensure efficacy between adults and children and adolescents. And I really want to emphasize that second point in the fact that a lot of the non-invasive tools that we have don't have adequate efficacy and adequate accuracy in pediatric patients. And with the risk of going from one stage to the next, these adolescents have the longest time to progress through disease. So it's really important to identify this group early on and accurately. So we have a big focus on pediatric populations for that reason.
Obviously, one of my populations of need postmenopausal women. So when you talk about a 17-year-old Hispanic female, being able to look at the bio differences between a female before, during, and after menopause going through any form of liver change and liver disease would be paramount to me. I am a different animal now than I was at 17 and in my 30s and later on. And I think probably the biggest population or shift than the men do or anything like that. And I would love to be able to see how that changes through. And I think what you offer with this science is that ability to nail down where we do it, because we look at all of these studies all the time. If below the age of 50, it's predominantly men. But again, you've still got postmenopausal women in that group, and we don't differentiate. We just say it's male versus it's females, but it's not. It's way more than that. And we just don't drill down enough. This lends itself to being really able to pick out those populations. I think obviously the genetic metabolic conditions of the liver that we can develop, and how much of it is nature, how much of it is nurture, and how much of it is a combination of both, you could potentially look to tweak out. And that's exciting. Coupled with Dean's work, we are getting, maybe not for 2024, maybe more for 2042, where you can really drill down in that exact population. It was a postmenopausal woman whose AI of thing would have proven that the non-invasives are going to produce this turnaround on this particular drug. This whole precision medicine becomes way more exciting, which is why I love this sum up, because everybody gives me these little ideas. Not that I'm going to work on them, I'm just finding the patients and chatting to them, but it's exciting.
No, actually, I'm smiling because I'm thinking who's going to be running this podcast in 2042. It certainly isn't me. I mean, if I could talk without drooling by 2042, I think I've done pretty well.
If I could do that after Christmas, I'll be doing very well.
Yeah. So one of the thoughts I had, though, Louise, is that to me, I mean, Rachel, you know this, but a lot of this to me goes back to, so what are the economics of all this going to look like? So, Rachel, the most interesting part of our conversation with Dean, for example, is that when they use some of the tools that they have available to them, they find that placebo response is consistently about a third, right? So do you take out this thing about placebo response being variable in studies? If you analyze correctly, it's about a third. And you have the right AI tools, it's consistently about a third, right? So one of the things that reminds me is the ability of good science, of good preclinical deep dive science, to identify new rules and new structures and bring clarity to some things that really are opaque right now, at best translucent. I'm wondering if there's anything you're working on right now that you think fits that kind of definition. If you get it right and if it pans out correctly, I'm not saying today because you haven't finished the studies yet, but where do you expect that what you're doing will be able to bring new clarity or new rules to how we think about all this?
Where? Like in which type of clinic? Or yeah.
I was thinking where in the population, but if your answer is better about, well, there are clinics that we can empower, then that's great also. So you tell us.
So it's really important to think of context of use during this early stage. So it would certainly be an enriched population. So I don't think it would be cost effective or energy effective to go out and screen the general population. And of course, sensitivity and specificity is dependent on the population. So an enriched population and patients who are considered high risk, so diabetes, obesity, or any aspect of metabolic syndrome, women with PCOS, or several genetic factors that are associated with high risk development of MASH and liver fibrosis. So the enriched population is certainly our focus. And one of the questions we're asking now is, of all of the groups I just mentioned, where is the performance of these biomarkers in these underlying causes or various etiologies? So that's what we're hoping to answer from this study, is to see if we can identify a set of biomarkers that do compensate for each of these distinct groups. But if not, we'll allow the data to speak for itself. So we'll then follow what path we think is best based off of the overall performance of our tools.
You have a lot to learn. I mean, I said in the best sense of the word, not in the, but you've got a lot to look forward to learning, is I think how I mean to say that. That's fantastic.
Yes.
As you said, you've been on a lot of planes, you've gone to a lot of meetings, you've seen a lot of things, and it's not only investor pitches, but actually going to events. And I'm wondering what you've observed that the people who listen to this podcast might not have observed because they haven't been there, or put together in a way that you haven't heard other people putting it together, because it's how your creative mind works. Anything you can educate people on or give them a thought on how to look at it differently? Answer might be no. That was a wild card question.
This goes back to a point where you're discussing a little bit earlier when I asked you about if you think OGA had a negative impact on later stage investors. And while that is not my direct arena, I'm definitely in contact with early stage investors. So the early stage investors that we pursue are in the life science space, are potential strategic partners, understand the hurdles, the time horizon to get to where we are today through various milestones, both preclinical and commercialization milestones. And what I have seen firsthand is that the early stage investors in the life science space are actively searching for MASH and liver fibrosis tools. They hear what's happening directly in the hepatology space, and they're getting more excited about the potential of non-invasive diagnostic tools to help risk stratify, diagnose, and identify these patients earlier. So in prior years, I've had to educate investors about the market opportunity, the size, and the growing epidemic. This year I've certainly seen a shift in the sense that when we are at conferences, pitches, or participating in these events, there are investors that are actively searching for non-invasive tools in this space that can push the needle forward more accurately, more cost effectively than other current tools. So that's one thing that I've seen on the ground, at least from an early stage investor perspective. And it's been wonderful, to say the least, because then we're not starting the conversation of here's the problem, here's the market opportunity, and here's how we're going to solve it. But we can go directly in, here's how we're solving this, and here's where we are in development, and then take the conversation from that point. So it cuts out a lot of early discussions, which do take weeks and sometimes months. So this has been helpful for us from a collaboration and investor standpoint.
That's great. And I think it's exciting for everyone here, because the products that you're talking about ultimately are going to play a big role, I expect, in making it more practical logistically and informationally for a wider audience of people, different specialties and stuff like that, to engage, in essence, to make the clinical pathway a lot more real than it is right now. So that's pretty fantastic. All right. So with that, 2024, what do you envision being the big things happening in this space in 2024 that will shape, if we have the same discussion at the end of the year, what do you think will be the things that will affect how we speak about 2024 at that moment?
March 14th, 2024, the go, no-go decision for resmetirom. I think that will, of course, this will improve patient outcomes significantly. I do think that this is going to spark a broader conversation with other specialties. So I do think that this will be the match, for lack of a better term, that really sparks the conversation between hepatology and GI with cardiology, endocrinology, because now there's more focus.
Other than that, and that's a big thing, okay, not to minimize, is there anything else that you see on the horizon? First of all, sunshine, and then we'll get to storm clouds in a minute.
I think that there, from a very biased perspective, I think that there's going to be a big demand for non-invasive tools that can accurately monitor MASH progression and regression, because while there is a plethora of tools for liver fibrosis, there's not that many non-invasive, cost-effective tools that can monitor therapeutic efficacy So I think that there's going to be a big shift in that next year. My biased, humble perspective, but I do think that this is going to be a supply and demand. Once there's a therapeutic, we really need a non-invasive means to accurately and cost-effectively monitor these patients over time.
Okay, that all makes tremendous sense. Are we going to get there in 2024, or do you think that's going to take a couple more years? I know you said your data isn't going to show until the end of the year. If I put a gun to your head and said, so what year are we talking about seeing something that doctors can use, what would your guess be? Let me underline, we're using the word guess.
Between 2025 and 2027, this space is slow for various reasons. Research is slow. Market adoption is slow. Moving things forward needs to be structured, intentional, and very methodical. So I think between 2025 and 2027, we will see more tools, whether it's from AGED or competitors and all the above.
Exciting stuff. If you saw storm clouds, or if you see storm clouds, and I know entrepreneurs aren't supposed to see storm clouds, but if you did, where would they be? Potential storm clouds.
I think entrepreneurs are certainly supposed to see storm clouds to be able to accurately communicate the risks.
I've blown enough money in my life not being able to do that for me to say that you're absolutely right. Now, go ahead.
I'm not sure. I think that there's various areas for storm clouds, but one thing to continue to speak about resmetirom is payer adoption. I think that as scientists, we focus predominantly on the science and the clinical trials, which of course is absolutely necessary. But payer adoption is something I'm concerned about. I know that there's been various articles published. However, I think payer adoption is as slow as regulatory hurdles. So I'm not sure how Medical has gone about their payer adoption strategy, but that's one thing that I think is going to be slow. So that's a potential storm cloud for next year.
Okay. Interestingly enough, I've believed that the best long-term solution to that storm cloud is the kind of work that you're doing. That ultimately the biggest problem here is that if we believe that we're only helping 25% of the patients we put on a drug and we can't figure that out for a year, that's really dicey, right? That makes the economic proposition really challenging. If we can get confident faster that we know who it's working for or change the definition of working. I mean, one of the things we were talking with Naeem about is the idea that in bariatric studies, it takes 5 years for people to fully reach whatever level of fibrotic regression they're going to get to. And the clinical trials are only 1 year long. So if you could say at the end of 1 year, this is a patient who's going to get there, that would be hugely helpful to payers and everybody else. Payers, particularly in Europe, where they keep the patients a lot longer, like for life, but everywhere. And I think the hope for that probably resides where you are. Better, more efficient early stage testing that can be precise about what are we actually seeing in this patient. So that's my unsolicited promo for what it is you work on, because I think it is that important.
Thank you.
I thought Rachel, as always, did a fantastic sum up of her area. I think obviously it's interesting about monitoring MASH and NAFLD because there's more and more data now using CAP. And there's one study recently that only looked at continuous attenuation parameter. And of course, that does measure the steatosis level, which is what we're wanting to see. So I think we are moving to being able to utilize other parts of that device than just look at stiffness. Also, the evidence that we produced that earlier on the year that you might want to change it by kilos in certain parameters, just do a little adaptation to make it more accurate on biopsy. So I think you're right. I think that's where we're going in the next couple of years. But I think storm clouds for me are lack of education of allied health to be able to deliver any of this. It's all right having a drug, but if you can't deliver it at the front, you don't have enough till assistants, you don't have enough people stocking those shelves, you don't have enough people at that end, and that's where our biggest weakness is. Those are my storm clouds, but it's very exciting. Well, you use fantastic, I use exciting.
Agreed. And the word I was going to use to describe Rachel's discussion today was fantastic, except you beat me to it, Louise. But I think I'm just going to double down on it. That's fine. Hey, Rachel, thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy Aruba. If you can find your way to Stingray City, it's really cool. It's a memory that's lingered with me for 25 years, so I figure it must be of some value.
Thank you, Walt. Thank you for the opportunity to come.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for your time today. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Have a nice holiday.
Happy holidays.
Bye-bye.
And now for the Season 4 End of year episode's business report.
Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava, glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. And also Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. The last time I recorded a business section for this podcast, the U.S. Congress was delaying getting badly needed aid to Ukraine. The world was decrying the death of Palestinian civilians, while most were forgetting, and even worse, some were celebrating, the horrible rapes, beheadings, and other beastly crimes Hamas committed on innocent Israelis October 7th that precipitated the Israeli military action. I'd love to say that 3 weeks later things have changed for the better, and there were days of hope in the Middle East during the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, but sadly, little is meaningfully improved. As we come to this holiday season, let's hope the Ukrainian military maintains and perseveres through the coming winter, and that we can find a solution in the Mideast that preserves an Israel that does not have to fear its neighbors and allows a Palestinian people who live next to them to find peace and prosperity and pursue a better quality of life for their families and themselves. Slava Ukraini, Am Yisrael Chai.
Congratulations, Yarn, and welcome back.
Last time we met, it was too soon to announce Professor Schottenberg's promotion to department head at the medical school in Saarland. Well, that's official now. Jorn has assumed his new responsibilities, and he will be with us on a more or less regular basis going forward. We may need to work a bit on how to improve his internet speed and reliability when staying overnight in Hamburg. I'm sure we'll work that out.
Hey, Spotify, thanks for the good news.
Last week, we received from Spotify their wrap-up numbers from 2023. What these numbers told us was that we had more growth this year than we had anticipated. 50% more listeners, 11% more streams, 72% of people listening doing so for the first time. And if we extrapolate up from Spotify's share of our entire listener pool, 3,000 listeners who rate us in their top 10 podcasts, 2,000 rating us in their top 5, and 750 rating us their overall top. Those are bigger numbers than we thought we had, and we're excited to know that so many people are gaining benefit from this podcast.
You will see new graphics and a new email address when we all return in 2024.
In the interest of efficiency and recognition of Eric's increasingly demanding schedule, we decided to execute the entire graphic and website cutover to MASH Tsunami. All will be fixed when we come back in the beginning of the new year.
The vault is closed for 2023.
Historically, we've included neither Vault conversations nor business sections during the year-end interview series. No more Vault this year as well, but there are a few business section comments I want to share. These may change during the interview week or not. If they change, we'll let you know. And that's it for the year. I want to thank our team, Jorn, Louise, Jake, Mike, Eric, Steve, for their work throughout the year, and more important, to thank you, the listeners, who stuck with us throughout. We've got more interviews ahead, and after that, we'll be back early in January with a new year of episodes and perhaps some new features as well. Until then, enjoy the holiday, happy 2024, and as always, stay safe and surf on. Bye-bye now.
Join us tomorrow when our interview partner will be Novo Nordisk International Medical Vice President Michelle Long.